The meeting between student representatives and the Higher Education Minister Naledi Pandor earlier this month. Protests continue at some tertiary institutions. Just yesterday, 7 students were arrested for public violence at the Mangosuthu University of Technology in KwaZulu-Natal. Other university students also demonstrated by setting alight mattresses in Durban. They have mentioned accommodation and fees among their grievances. Since these protests erupted, 1 student passed away after being injured. The Department of Higher Education were not available, unfortunately, this morning, but will come at a later point. They have promised us. But with us now in studio is Luyanda Tenge. He's the Deputy President of the South African Students' Congress, or SASCO. Thanks very, very much, Luyanda. Thanks so much for coming in.
Yeah, thank you very much. Good morning, Lillian.
Good morning.
Good morning to the viewers at home.
All right, let's get your grievances up front. What are you unhappy with, and what are you demanding?
Okay. Look, let me start by saying we've started this protest, I think, 2 weeks back, and fundamental to the protest that we have. One is the issue of student accommodation. That you'd find out that since the advent of free education in our country, we have many students who developed an interest of coming in institutions of higher learning, and therefore you'd find out that some of them, they are accessing the system, but they have a problem of student accommodation. You'd find out that a university that is accommodating 20,000 students is only having 5,000 beds or 5,000 beds that can accommodate students. And you'd find out that you have the rest of students who does not have a place to stay. And you'd find out in other situations, you have a situation whereby there is accommodation, but the accommodation is not conducive for a student to study properly, is not conducive for them to perform in their academic activities. But secondly, was the issue of registration, where you'd find out that there are many students who are denied access through registration in these institutions of higher learning. You find a situation whereby a student is affected by historical debt, for example. You have many students who, some of them, they are owing the debt of previous years, and now the universities are saying to them they must pay a certain amount for them to be able to register, of which that is what becomes a problem to us, because we thought that we are enjoying free education in our country, and we're not expecting any poor students who wants to access education, but that student is told by the management of the university that that student must cover their money.
So basically what you're asking for, so I can just understand your demands, is that when a student is promised a place at a university, that they get decent accommodation and that it's conducive to studying. That's the one thing you're asking for, is the accommodation is decent, that they're able to accommodate students that are unable to accommodate themselves. So that's demand number 1, is that correct?
Yes.
Demand number 2 is historical debt.
Yes.
You want that scrapped, all debt?
Yes.
For all students?
For all students.
That cannot afford to pay this?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So those are your 2 demands on the table?
No, not the only.
There's some more.
Yes, there's more. Look, we have a challenge in institutions of higher learning. I think, let me put it like that. You have a challenge whereby you'd have students submitting their memorandum to the management. Look, our approach has been that let us sit down with the management of the university, discuss issues that are going to make our university to run smoothly. You'd have a situation whereby SRC and management is sitting down, decisions are taken. After 2 days or 3, when decisions are supposed to be implemented by the same management, those decisions are not implemented. For an example, you'd go to Mangosuthu University of Technology in KZN, where students had a meeting with the management to say, let us address these issues that are affecting students, but the management will agree, but later on would then not implement the agreement. But the other issue that I think is important is that students, when you would remember in other institutions, they are doing diploma, you finish your diploma, but because you have this historical debt, you cannot be able to get your certificate 1, you cannot be able to get your academic record or your transcript. That is going to make you at least to go to other universities. If you want to change the university, number 1, number 2, is going to allow you at least to look for the employment opportunities, and you cannot look for employment opportunities without that credit certificate or academic record, without that particular certificate. That's why I was saying fundamentally the issues of historical debt are issues that the Department of Higher Education, the management of these institutions must look up to, so that it addresses all of them, so that it can limit the students who cannot be able to register because they have historical debt, so that it can limit students who cannot access or get their certificate and their academic record, etc., etc.
Okay.
The issue of student accommodation, we have proposals as the South African Student Congress to say the Minister of Higher Education, together with the President of the country and the Minister of Public Works, the Minister of Human Settlement, they must sit down. We discuss under one roof and say, let us have this student accommodation convention where we are going to discuss and have a plan of how we are going to address this particular issue of student accommodation.
You've had a lot of meetings, though, if I'm not mistaken. I mean, from what I'm seeing, Minister met with SRC presidents from all of the 26 public universities, the South African Students' Union, the CEO of the Universities of South Africans, NSFAS was all there. What happened? So what happened with this meeting?
Okay.
What were the resolutions? Very quickly.
Yes, I agree. There was such a meeting, and there are some progressive decisions that were taken there. For example, the minister committed to say we are going to look to the issue of. They are going to look to the issue of historical debt. By March, they are going to make a determination, a declaration on how the department is saying what must happen with those students. But we are saying, in the meantime, the students who are on the queues, they want to register. They must register so that when she is making a determination in March, students would have been in system already starting, because the academic year has already started.
Okay.
On the issue of certificate and the academic records, we are saying a clear, because you see, the crisis here, as I said earlier, is that you'd have a decision taken. When we go back to these universities, because they are autonomous, they are going to frustrate students. You'd find out that some of the decisions are not implemented, etc., etc. So those are the issues. We agree that there were issues that are progressive, that in the meeting of USAF, SAUS, and the Ministry of Higher Education, they have taken some of the progressive decisions, but we are saying we want an implementation.
Okay,
and we are
so
saying
that's where the sticking point is. The decisions are made that have made you happy, but they're not being implemented. Why
some of them.
Some of them. Why violence, though? Because this is now causing a lot of trouble. All these institutions in KZN, for example, teaching has been suspended. We saw visuals yesterday of mattresses being thrown out of accommodation, and perhaps you can tell us a little bit more about that particular incident. It was where students were setting alight mattresses and throwing them out the windows in Durban at some of the accommodation facilities. And it turns into very ugly protests where students are being arrested now. So address that for us.
Okay. Look, SASCO have been always of the view that when we're protesting, of course, in institutions of higher learning where there are properties, and you'd know that. You see, sometimes when you're protesting, there are situations of this nature where students are vandalizing, they are doing a violent protest. But we are saying, as South African students, we condemn such activities. We are saying to students, they must not ban any properties of the institutions. They must not do any violent to properties of the institution, because those properties are the properties after the protest that they are going to need, that they are going to use. So we are saying, we are calling all students across the country, all political organizations across the country, we are saying they must unite and do a protest or a demonstration that is not going to vandalize properties of the institution. We condemn such activities, and we are saying to students across the country, they must stop that element if it's them who are doing that. Yeah. Because we must also be aware that there are also opportunists. When we are striking, when we are protesting, sometimes there are opportunists, people who would want to come and be agent provocateurs and actually try to make our protest to be illegitimate, try to paint a bad picture about students. But I'm not accusing anyone. I'm saying our students must not vandalize if any of them has done that.
Yeah, well, I mean, we've seen visuals of this, but, it's quite unfortunate. I suppose you don't know the details. Do you know the details of what happened? Why they were burning mattresses? Do you know why?
No, we
you don't know.
We
you don't know that
know
one.
why.
I
Yes.
won't press you on that one then.
Yes.
The promises of free education. Is it just that, a promise that's not being implemented?
Education.
Free education, free tertiary education, what you're fighting for?
Yes, the South African Student Congress is fighting for, of course, free quality education. Let us not forget that part, free quality education. In South Africa now, we don't have free quality education, but we appreciate the fact that we are starting, because this is a starting point, this is a step one towards what we want as a South African Student Congress, this free education. But we're saying it's not implemented properly as it was announced, because if it was implemented properly, at least we would have not have these situations where there are students who cannot register. Remember, there are many students across the country who have been crying. Some other universities, they only allowed them after we have started to protest and said, this is not the free education that we were promised. Having to understand, of course, that this is not totally the kind of free education as South African Student Congress we want, but we appreciate the fact that there are steps that are being taken towards that particular call, this free education that was pronounced, but we are saying it must be implemented so that we can go to step two that is going to speak totally of what we want as a South African Student Congress.
All right, let's leave it there. Luyanda Tenge, the Deputy President of the South African Student Congress, or SASCO, talking to us about their demands for universities and tertiary education, accommodation, fees, historical debt, all of these things that they're hoping will be addressed. The Minister has promised to give feedback by the end of March, but they need people to be registered, and this is what's causing big problems. Higher Education Department, unfortunately, couldn't come in this morning, but they have promised to come into studio at another point.